The sun had just begun to rise over the quiet Arizona landscape when Tom Harris stepped out of his small wooden cabin. Tom lived alone on a wide piece of land with red soil, tall cactus plants, and long stretches of open space where his horse, Shadow, loved to roam. This land had been Tom's home since childhood, and he knew every rock, every turn, and every path that crossed it. The mornings here were peaceful, and Tom enjoyed them more than anything else. It was the time of day when the world felt calm, and the cool breeze carried the smell of dry grass and fresh earth. Tom walked toward the small stable next to his cabin, expecting to see Shadow waiting for him like always. Shadow was usually gentle and patient. He would stand still, flick his tail, and watch Tom approach as if greeting an old friend. But today was different. The moment Tom came close, Shadow began acting in a way Tom had never seen before. The horse paced back and forth nervously. His ears twitched constantly, and he kept turning his head toward the trail that led down the canyon. Tom frowned and stepped closer. "Easy, boy," he said softly, patting the horse's neck. But Shadow didn't calm down. Instead, he pushed his nose against Tom's shoulder, almost insisting on something. Tom looked into the horse's dark, intelligent eyes. Shadow was trying to tell him something that much was clear, but Tom didn't yet know what it was. Shadow pulled away and then looked toward the canyon trail again. He stomped his front hooves on the ground and let out a short, urgent sound. Tom watched closely. Shadow was not just restless. He wanted Tom to follow him. Tom had lived around horses his entire life. He had learned to read their behavior the same way other people read books. And right now, Shadow was showing signs of concern, maybe even worry. Horses did not act like this unless something unusual had happened. "All right," Tom said, picking up his hat and placing it on his head. "Show me. Show me." Shadow immediately turned and began walking toward the trail. Tom grabbed a rope but didn't need to pull. Shadow moved ahead on his own while Tom followed on foot. The trail was narrow, curving down toward a large canyon with rocky walls and scattered bushes. Tom knew this trail well, but he rarely used it early in the morning. It wasn't the safest place to walk alone because the ground was uneven, and some sections were steep, but Shadow kept moving with purpose, so Tom pushed aside his hesitation and continued behind him. As they went deeper into the canyon, Tom noticed how unusually quiet everything was. No birds chirped. No small animals scurried across the path. Even the wind seemed to have paused. That silence made Tom uneasy. It was the kind of stillness that made a person feel like something was waiting to be discovered. Shadow suddenly stopped near a cluster of bushes. He lowered his head and nudged at something hidden beneath the leaves. Tom hurried forward, his heart beating faster now. Something was lying on the ground, someone. Tom moved the branches aside and gasped softly. There, on the dry earth, was a young Apache woman. She looked very weak. Her clothes were dusty, her hair tangled, and her skin pale. She wasn't moving, but Tom could see the soft rise and fall of her chest. She was alive, but barely. Tom knelt beside her gently. He did not know who she was or how she got here, but it was clear she needed help. He spoke softly, trying not to startle her. "Miss, can you hear me?" But she didn't respond. Her eyes stayed closed, and she didn't move even a little. Shadow stood beside them, lowering his head as if he too was worried. Tom touched the woman's wrist carefully and found her pulse. It was weak but steady. He looked around the area, trying to understand what might have happened. There were no footprints except his own and Shadow's. There were no signs that anyone else had passed through recently. The woman looked as if she had been here for hours, maybe even since the day before. Tom knew he couldn't leave her lying here. The canyon was too remote, and the weather could turn harsh quickly. She needed shade, water, and care. Tom gently lifted her into his arms. She was very light, almost weightless, as if she had not eaten or drunk enough for a long time. Shadow stayed close, walking beside Tom. As he carried the woman back toward the cabin, the walk uphill felt longer than before. Not because of the weight, but because Tom kept thinking about what to do next. He had no idea who she was or where she had come from. All he knew was that she needed help, and he was the only person around who could give it. When they reached the cabin, Tom pushed the door open with his shoulder and gently placed the woman on his small bed. He quickly brought over a blanket and draped it over her. Her breathing was uneven, and her face looked tired and strained. Tom filled a cup with water and dipped a cloth into it. He carefully placed the cool cloth on her forehead. Her skin felt warm, and he worried she might be dehydrated. Shadow stood just outside the door, watching silently. It was as though he understood the seriousness of the situation. Tom checked the woman's hands. Her palms were scratched, and her fingers were dusty, as if she had tried to crawl or pull herself along the ground. Her feet showed signs of long walking. It must have taken her great effort to reach even the canyon trail. Tom sat down beside her and waited. He hoped she would wake up soon and explain everything. Hours passed slowly. The sunlight shifted across the cabin floor, moving from one side to the other. Tom stayed close, replacing the cool cloth again and again. He offered her small sips of water whenever her lips moved or her eyes flickered. At one moment, the woman finally stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, and she took a shaky breath. Tom leaned forward. "You're safe," he said softly. "You're in my cabin. My horse found you." She blinked slowly, her eyes filled with confusion. She looked around the small room, then at Tom, then at the door where Shadow's dark shape stood. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. "It's all right," Tom said gently. "You've been through something difficult. Just rest." The woman tried again, her voice barely a whisper. "Water." Tom lifted the cup and held it carefully to her lips. She drank a small sip, then closed her eyes again. After a few quiet minutes, she whispered her name. It was Naya. Tom repeated it softly. "Naya. That's a beautiful name." She nodded weakly, though she still looked unsure and frightened. Tom spoke in a calm voice. "You're safe here. No one will harm you. Just rest. I'll help you until you're strong again." Shadow let out a gentle breath outside, as though agreeing with Tom. Tom sat beside her for the rest of the afternoon, watching over her and making sure she remained stable. He felt a sense of responsibility he had not expected that morning. A few hours ago, he had simply stepped out to feed his horse. Now, his entire day and possibly his life had changed. Shadow, who rarely acted in unusual ways, had somehow known a person needed help. Without him, Naya might still be lying in the canyon, unseen and alone. As evening approached, Tom adjusted the blanket over her once more. She looked peaceful now, her breathing slow and steady. The cabin felt quiet but warm, and the soft golden light of the setting sun filled the room. Tom glanced at Shadow with gratitude. "You did something important today, boy," he murmured. Shadow flicked his tail and lowered his head, as if understanding the praise. Tom sat down again, watching over Naya as she slept. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know who she truly was, or how she had ended up alone in the canyon. But he knew one thing with complete certainty: Shadow had led him to her for a reason. And that morning discovery was only the beginning of something much bigger. Tom spent the entire night checking on Naya. Even though he was tired, he refused to sleep because he wanted to make sure she stayed comfortable. Every few minutes, he looked at her face to see if she was breathing normally. Sometimes she moved her hand slightly, and sometimes she sighed softly. But mostly she remained still, resting deeply. Tom kept a kerosene lamp glowing on the small table, so the room wouldn't be completely dark. The gentle light made the cabin feel warm and calm. By morning, the sky outside had turned a soft golden color, and the birds had begun their quiet morning songs. Shadow, who had stayed near the door most of the night, walked around the stable and waited for Tom to come out. Tom stood up slowly, stretched his back, and took one more look at Naya. She seemed more relaxed now than the day before. He stepped outside for a moment to check on Shadow and give him water and some feed. The horse nuzzled Tom's shoulder softly, as if asking about Naya. Tom patted him and whispered, "She's still resting. You did something good, Shadow." After feeding Shadow, Tom returned to the cabin and prepared a simple breakfast for himself, hot tea and a piece of bread. He didn't want to cook anything too strong because he didn't want the smell to bother Naya. When he sat down to drink his tea, he heard a soft sound behind him. He turned quickly and saw Naya opening her eyes again. She looked confused, as if she didn't know where she was. Her eyes moved around the room slowly, taking in the walls, the wooden table, the shelves, and finally Tom. She didn't speak right away. She simply observed everything, trying to understand what had happened. Tom offered her a small, gentle smile. "Good morning. You're safe here." Naya blinked, still weak. Her voice was soft but clearer than before. "Where am I?" "In my cabin," Tom replied. "My horse found you in the canyon. You were very weak, so I brought you here to help you recover." She nodded slightly, though she still looked unsure. Her hands rested on the blanket, and Tom noticed that her fingers trembled a little. Tom got up and poured a bit of warm water into a cup. He walked to her slowly so she wouldn't feel frightened. "Try to drink a little," he said gently. Naya raised her head slightly, and Tom helped her hold the cup. She sipped the water carefully. After a few sips, she relaxed back onto the pillow. "Thank you," she whispered. Tom placed the cup on the table. "You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have helped." Naya looked at him for a moment, her eyes showing both gratitude and uncertainty. "Not everyone," she said quietly. Tom didn't know how to respond to that, so he simply nodded and sat down on the chair beside the bed. There was silence for a while, the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable but simply peaceful. Tom didn't want to ask too many questions too soon. He understood that she needed time to gather her thoughts and strength. Eventually, Naya spoke again, her voice soft. "I was looking for healing plants. For someone sick." She paused, trying to find the right words. "I walked far from my people." Tom listened carefully, but he didn't interrupt. He could see that even talking required effort for her. "I got tired," she continued. "I couldn't walk anymore." Her eyes lowered, remembering the long, lonely hours she must have spent outdoors. "I thought no one would find me." Tom leaned forward slightly and said, "Shadow found you." He knew something was wrong. Naya turned her head toward the door, where Shadow's silhouette could be seen through the small window. Her expression softened. "He is a good horse," Tom smiled. "The best partner I have." Naya gave a tiny nod. She looked at her hands again, noticing the scratches and dust. Tom saw her expression and gently reassured her. "You've been through a lot. But you're safe now. You can rest." He stood up suddenly, realizing she might be hungry. "Let me get you something light to eat." He went to the small kitchen area and prepared a bowl of warm soup made from vegetables. It had a soft flavor and was easy to digest. When he brought it to her, she hesitated at first, but Tom encouraged her gently. "Try a little, it will help you feel stronger." She took a small spoonful, tasting it carefully. Her eyes softened, as if the warm soup brought comfort. She ate slowly, and Tom felt relieved to see her gaining even a little energy. After she ate a bit more, she closed her eyes and rested again. Tom took the bowl away and cleaned the table. He moved quietly so he wouldn't disturb her. For the next few hours, Naya rested peacefully. Sometimes she opened her eyes and looked around the room as if trying to memorize her surroundings. Other times, she simply watched Tom as he worked around the cabin, washing dishes, feeding Shadow, sweeping the floor. She seemed calm, knowing someone was nearby. Later in the afternoon, Naya spoke again. "You live alone?" Tom nodded. "Yes. Been here most of my life." "Your family?" she asked softly. "They lived here once," he answered, keeping his tone gentle. "Now, it's just me." Naya looked at the ceiling quietly. "My family is waiting for me," she whispered, almost to herself. Tom heard her words clearly, but he didn't push her for details. He understood that whatever had happened before he found her must have been difficult. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable. Instead, he said, "When you're strong enough, I'll help you return to them. For now, just focus on resting." Naya looked at him with grateful eyes. You are kind. Tom chuckled softly. I'm just doing what anyone should do. Naya shook her head slightly. You don't know me, but you helped me. That is kindness. Tom didn't expect her words to affect him as deeply as they did. Something in her voice made him realize how truly alone she must have felt in the canyon. Her trust, even in her weak state, touched him. As the day went on, Naya tried to sit up a little, using her elbow for support. Tom quickly moved beside her to help. Take it slow, he said. She managed to sit with his help, and for the first time, she looked fully around the room. Her eyes lingered on the shelves filled with jars, the wooden chest, the boots near the door, and the old photographs on the wall. The cabin was simple, but it was warm and safe. Tom gave her another cup of water. She drank it slowly. How long? I sleep? She asked. Almost a day, Tom answered. Your body needed rest. She nodded again and looked toward the window. The sky outside was turning orange as the sun began to lower. The world looks peaceful here, she whispered. Tom followed her gaze. It usually is. They spent a few more minutes in quiet conversation. Tom told her a little about his land, his daily routine, and how Shadow liked wandering around the open space. Naya listened with interest, but Tom noticed that she still seemed uneasy, as if her heart carried something heavy. At one point she touched the blanket nervously and said, I want to tell you more, but my mind is not clear yet. Tom answered gently, You don't need to explain anything right now. When you feel ready, you can tell me. Naya looked relieved at his words. Trust was growing slowly, like a small flame gaining strength. As evening approached, Tom brought a small lantern inside and placed it near the bed. He made sure Naya had enough water, and he adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. She looked tired again, and Tom encouraged her to rest more. You're getting stronger already, he said. Just give yourself time. Naya's eyes softened. Thank you, she whispered, before closing her eyes once again. Shadow let out a soft breath outside, as if guarding them both. Tom sat in the wooden chair beside her, feeling the quiet peace of the room settle around him. He realized something important, that helping Naya wasn't just about kindness anymore. There was a connection forming, a quiet understanding that something meaningful was happening. He didn't know exactly what had caused her to fall weak in the canyon, or what troubles weighed on her heart. But he knew one thing for certain. Naya had come into his life for a reason, and Shadow had understood that reason before he even saw her. The day slowly faded into night, and Tom kept watch over her again. Naya slept more peacefully this time, and every soft breath she took reminded Tom that he had done the right thing. He knew the coming days would bring more questions, more challenges, and more truths. But for now, in the warm, quiet cabin, with the soft glow of the lantern and the steady rhythm of Shadow outside, everything felt calm. And little did Tom know, this peaceful moment was only the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives in ways they had never imagined. The next morning, sunlight quietly entered the small cabin, touching the wooden floor with a soft golden glow. Tom woke up in the chair beside Naya's bed. His neck felt stiff, but he didn't mind. The first thing he did was check on her. She was still sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady and calm. She looked stronger today, as if her body had finally begun to heal. Tom stood up slowly, trying not to make any noise. He stepped outside to check on Shadow. The horse was already awake, walking around the stable area with gentle steps. When he saw Tom, he lowered his head as if asking, "How is she?" Tom smiled and patted Shadow's neck. "She's better today," he whispered. "Thanks to you." After feeding Shadow, Tom returned to the cabin. Naya was awake now, sitting up slightly and looking toward the window. She turned her head when she heard the door open. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," Tom replied warmly. "How are you feeling?" "I feel stronger," Naya said, testing her voice. "Still tired, but not like before." "That's good," Tom said. "You're healing." Naya gave a small smile. It was the first real smile he had seen on her face, and it made the room feel brighter. Tom brought her some warm water and a small bowl of soup. Naya ate slowly, but with more confidence than the previous day. When she finished, she leaned back against the pillow, her eyes thoughtful. For a while, they didn't speak. Tom cleaned the table and checked the firewood. Naya watched him quietly, as if studying him not with distrust, but with curiosity. After some time, she said softly, "You have a gentle home." Tom glanced at her. "It's simple, but it keeps me warm." Naya nodded. "Simple is good." She looked around again, at the shelves with jars, the old photographs, and the handmade tools. To her, these things showed a life, lived quietly, but with purpose. Tom sat on the chair beside her. "Naya," he said softly, "if you feel ready, you can tell me what happened before I found you. But only if you want to. You don't have to rush." Naya took a slow breath. Her eyes softened, remembering something deep inside her heart. "I want to tell you," she said. "You helped me. You should know." Tom nodded gently. "I walked far from my people," Naya began. "I needed to collect plants we use for healing. They grow in places where the air is cool and the soil stays damp. I went early in the morning. The sky was still gray." She paused, her eyes distant. "I found the plants I needed, but when I tried to return home, I felt very tired. I had not eaten enough, and I had walked too far. My legs became weak. I sat down to rest, and the ground felt warm. The sun was high. I told myself, just a little rest. But then my eyes closed. I don't know how long I slept." Tom listened carefully, letting her speak at her own pace. "When I woke up," Naya continued, "I tried to walk again, but my body felt heavy. My head hurt. The land around me looked different. I didn't know where I was. I tried to find shade. I tried to stay away from the sun." She paused, swallowing slowly. "I think I walked in circles. Everything looked unfamiliar. I was tired, very tired." Her voice grew soft. "I thought maybe I wouldn't see my family again." Tom felt a quiet ache in his chest listening to her words. He couldn't imagine the fear she must have felt, all alone and unsure of which direction to go. "You were very brave," Tom said gently. Naya shook her head. "I was only trying to survive." She looked up at him with gratitude. "You and your horse saved me." Tom smiled softly. Shadow did most of the work. At the sound of his name, Shadow poked his head through the open door, ears pricked forward. It made both Tom and Naya smile. Naya slowly reached out her hand. Shadow stepped closer, lowering his head. Naya touched his muzzle gently. For a moment, the room felt filled with a quiet kind of magic, something peaceful and warm. "He has a strong spirit," Naya whispered. "He listens to the world around him." Tom nodded. "He understands things better than I do sometimes." As the day went on, Naya gained more strength. She was able to sit longer, and her voice became clearer. She even told Tom a little about her people, not details of sensitive things, but simple stories. She spoke of how they celebrated the seasons, how they respected the land, and how children learned from elders by listening to stories told before sunset. Tom enjoyed listening more than he expected. Her voice was gentle, and the stories carried a sense of wisdom and peace. He realized how much she loved her people and her traditions. At one point, Naya softly touched the simple necklace she wore, made from brown beads. "My mother made this for me," she said. "She told me it would keep me safe. When I was lost, I held it and thought of her." Tom nodded. "You'll see her again. When you're fully healed, I'll take you home." A small spark of relief appeared in Naya's eyes. "You would do that?" "Of course," Tom said. "You deserve to go back to your family." Naya looked down, touched by his kindness. "Most people stay away from us," she said quietly. "They do not understand us." Tom thought for a moment before replying. "Sometimes people fear what they don't understand. But that doesn't make it right." Naya stared at him, her eyes gentle but surprised. She didn't expect someone outside her tribe to speak with such fairness. She felt a bit more trust grow in her heart. Shadow stayed near the cabin most of the day, as if watching over them both. Every time Naya looked outside, the horse was there, strong and calm. She felt safe knowing he was close. In the evening, after giving Naya her soup, Tom stepped outside to gather more firewood. The sky had turned a soft pink, and a cool breeze moved through the land. Shadow followed him around, nudging his shoulder as if saying, "Don't stay out too long." Tom chuckled. "You're more protective than usual, boy." When Tom returned inside, Naya was sitting up, looking much steadier. She gazed at him with a thoughtful expression. "Tom," she said slowly, "may I ask something?" "Of course," Tom replied. "Why do you live alone?" she asked gently. "You are kind. You help. You care. Why is there no one living here with you?" Tom paused, caught off guard by her question. He rubbed the back of his neck, searching for the right words. "Life just turned out this way," he said after a moment. "My parents passed long ago. This land became my responsibility. I stayed to take care of it." He smiled softly. "And Shadow came into my life when he was just a small colt. We became a team." Naya nodded, understanding the quiet loneliness behind his words. "Your heart is strong," she said gently. "You live in silence, but your spirit is not empty." Tom felt a warmth in his chest. Naya had a way of speaking that made simple words feel deep and meaningful. As night approached, Naya seemed relaxed, almost peaceful. She leaned back and watched the lantern light flicker softly on the walls. Tom sat beside her, sharpening a small wooden tool just to keep his hands busy. They didn't speak much, but the silence felt comfortable, a sign of trust growing between two people who had been strangers only days before. After a while, Naya said quietly, "Tom, I feel something inside. A feeling I haven't felt since I got lost. I feel safe." Tom looked at her gently. "You are safe, I promise. Not just my body," she said softly. "My heart also feels safe." Tom didn't know what to say to that, but he smiled warmly. He didn't want to break the moment. It felt like something rare, an invisible thread weaving between two lives that were never meant to cross, yet somehow did. When Naya finally closed her eyes to rest, Tom remained seated beside her, feeling something shift inside him too. He couldn't explain it, but he knew things were changing. Not just for Naya, but for him as well. Shadow lay near the door, his ears listening to every sound, his presence calm and protective. In the quiet glow of the lantern, Tom realized that this was no longer simply a rescue. It was the beginning of a bond built on trust, kindness, and the unexpected path that life sometimes brings. Neither of them knew it yet, but this growing connection would soon lead them into moments that would change everything, for both their worlds and for their hearts. The morning air was cool when Tom stepped outside, and the sky carried a soft silver color that usually appeared only before sunrise. It was the kind of peaceful hour when the world felt still, as if waiting for the day to fully awaken. Tom breathed in slowly, feeling the calm settle over him. But beneath that calm, a new sense of urgency lived quietly in his heart. Naya had grown stronger. Her words were clearer, her steps more steady, and her spirit more alive. It was time to think about taking her back to her people. Inside the cabin, Naya sat on the edge of the bed, tying the thin rope of her small necklace. Tom watched her for a moment, noticing how her posture had changed. She no longer looked like someone lost or uncertain. There was strength in her presence, again, gentle, but steady. "You're looking much better today," Tom said. Naya lifted her head and gave him a small smile. "I feel better. My body still feels tired sometimes, but I can walk without help now." "That's good," Tom said. "We should plan your journey home." Naya's smile faded a little. She looked down at her hands. "I worry," she said softly. "I walked far when I was lost. I don't know the way anymore." "See, you don't have to," Tom replied kindly. "Shadow and I will go with you." Naya looked up, surprised. You would walk with me? All the way? Tom nodded. I promised you. And I don't break promises. At his words, Naya's eyes softened. She placed her hand over her necklace. My family will be grateful. Juster, Tom didn't say anything for a moment. He simply nodded, then turned to prepare for their journey. He filled 2 small water bags, packed dried fruit, bread, and a few supplies in a leather pouch. He also took a blanket, just in case the nights became cold. Shadow stood outside, stamping the ground lightly with his hoof, as if he already knew something important was happening. Tom placed the saddle on him, and the horse stayed calm, lowering his head for Tom to buckle the straps. When everything was ready, Tom turned to Naya. Are you sure you're strong enough to travel? Naya nodded. Yes, my heart is ready. Tom helped her outside, but she walked with steady steps. Shadow immediately came close to her, lowering his head so she could touch him. She stroked him gently. He has been watching me since the first day, she said softly. He cares, Tom replied. He chooses who he trusts. Naya smiled and whispered, Thank you, Shadow. The horse let out a soft breath. As if answering her, they set out slowly, walking through the open land that stretched far into the distance. The ground was warm under the sun, and the sky above looked large and endless. The air carried the scent of dry earth and sagebrush. Tom walked beside Shadow, while Naya walked just behind them, her steps steady. As they traveled, Tom kept glancing at the ground, noticing faint tracks. He didn't speak about them yet, but something inside him tightened. He wanted Naya to stay calm. Naya walked in silence for a while, using the soft rhythm of footsteps to gather her thoughts. After some time, she asked, How far is your land from here? Tom answered, Not too far. But your home? That will be a longer journey. Maybe 2 days if we move slowly. 3 if we rest often. Naya nodded. My people live close to a river. I remember the sound of water. We'll find it, Tom said confidently. They continued walking. The land slowly changed around them. Dry fields turned into rolling hills, and the wind carried the soft rustling of distant trees. Birds passed overhead, their wings carving gentle patterns through the sky. Naya breathed deeply. The world feels larger when you walk through it, she said. Tom smiled. Yes, and quieter too. Shadow suddenly lifted his head high, ears pointing forward. Tom noticed immediately. He placed his hand gently on Shadow's neck. Something's out there, he whispered, not in fear, but in awareness. Naya looked around. Is it dangerous? Tom shook his head. No, not dangerous. Just something that Shadow doesn't recognize. Shadow continued listening, and after a moment, he relaxed. Naya touched him softly. He feels the land like we do, she said. He listens to it. That's what makes him special, Tom replied. They continued their journey at a steady pace. Sometimes Tom and Naya talked. Other times they walked in quiet harmony. Naya shared small pieces of her childhood, how she used to sit by the river with her brother, listening to stories told by elders. She explained how her people believed that every part of the land had a spirit, every tree, every stone, every breeze. Tom listened to her stories with curiosity. He had lived on the land his whole life, but he had never thought about it the way Naya described it. At one point, Tom asked, Do you miss home? Naya's eyes softened. Every day. But when I was lost, I was afraid I would never see it again. Tom felt something gentle rise in his chest, something warm. Hope is a good thing to carry, he said quietly. They walked until the sun began sinking low in the sky. The golden light wrapped around the hills, and long shadows stretched across the land. Tom stopped and said, We should rest here for the night. Naya agreed. They found a comfortable spot near a small cluster of rocks and set down their supplies. Tom laid the blanket on the ground for Naya to sit on. Shadow grazed nearby, keeping one eye on them, as if he were still on duty. Tom started a small fire using dry branches. The warm glow created a small circle of comfort in the open land. Naya watched the flames dance gently. "This reminds me of evenings with my family," she said. "We sat around a fire and told stories until the stars filled the sky." Tom looked up at the slowly appearing stars. "Do you want to tell me one of those stories?" Naya hesitated, then smiled softly. "Yes, I will tell you one." She told him about a story passed down by her elders, about a young girl who listened to the wind until she understood its language. The wind taught her how to guide lost travelers back home. It was a story of kindness, courage, and trust in the natural world. Tom listened carefully, enjoying the quiet beauty of her words. When she finished, they both looked up at the stars. The sky was clear and filled with shimmering points of light. "It's beautiful," Naya whispered. "Always," Tom replied. They rested soon after. Tom stayed awake longer, listening to the night sounds, the soft rustling of grass, distant calls of small animals, and the steady breathing of Shadow. He wondered what Naya's people would think of him. He hoped they would see he meant well. The next morning, they continued their journey. The land grew greener as they approached the area where Naya believed her people lived. Shadow walked with more energy, as if he sensed they were getting closer. But as they moved down a small slope, Tom noticed something again: tracks in the soft soil. He paused and crouched down, touching them lightly. They looked fresh, but he didn't want Naya to worry. Naya stepped beside him. "Something is wrong?" she asked softly. Tom shook his head gently. "No, just footprints. Probably travelers passing through." Naya nodded, trusting his words. They continued walking, and at last, the distant sound of flowing water reached their ears. Naya's face lit up. "The river," she whispered. "We're close," Tom smiled. "Then let's get you home." As they walked closer, the land felt different, more alive. The breeze carried the scent of fresh water and soft earth. Naya's heart began to beat faster. She recognized the shapes of the hills, the curve of the riverbank, and the way the trees leaned slightly toward the water. Then she saw something: a small figure in the distance. As they approached, the figure became clearer. It was a young boy, running along the river's edge. Naya gasped softly. "My brother," Tom smiled. "Go to him." Naya took a few steps forward, then more, then more. The boy stopped and squinted, trying to see who was coming. When he recognized her, his face lit with joy. He ran toward her with all his strength. Tom stayed back, letting the moment belong to them. Shadow stepped beside Tom, lowering his head softly. Tom whispered, "We made it, boy." For the first time since he found Naya in the canyon, Tom felt a weight lift from his heart. Her journey home had begun, and it felt like the world was finally settling into its right place again. Little did he know, however, that his part in the story was not finished yet. A new chapter was waiting just beyond the riverbank. One that would bring understanding, healing, and a connection stronger than he had ever imagined.